Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, and for today's headlines we have: a federal judge has denied state's bid to halt Doge and Musk's work. National Science Foundation fires roughly 10% of its workforce. Artists protest new NEA restrictions. A$AP Rocky acquitted of shooting former friend. Hochul may deploy National Guard at denied state's bid to halt Doge and Musk's work. A federal judge on Tuesday denied an effort by Democratic State Attorney General to temporarily halt the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency from accessing data or terminating workers at certain federal agencies. Though the judge sided with Doge, she seems skeptical of Elon Musk's role with the entity. Her ruling followed a government filing Monday night that Musk wasn't technically involved as an employee or leader of the initiative. What the judge ruled. In a lawsuit, Democratic attorneys generals from 14 states alleged, among other things, that Musk's nebulous role in the administration is illegal and violates the separation of powers assigned by the U.S. Constitution. The AGs argued that President Trump has delegated virtually unchecked authority to Mr. Musk without proper legal authorization from Congress. At a hearing Monday in the case, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, an appointee of former President Barack Obama, expressed skepticism at the sweeping request the plaintiffs made to halt Doge's work, but was also skeptical of the claim from government lawyers that Musk had no authority to make governmental decisions. On Tuesday, Chutkan denied a request for a temporary restraining order because she wrote there was not a clear evidence of imminent irreparable harm to these plaintiffs. But she also admonished lawyers for the government who said Doge had no authority over personal actions and wrote, plaintiffs legitimately call into question what appears to be the unchecked authority of an unelected individual, an entity that was not created by Congress and over which it has no oversight. The White House says Musk is not in charge of Doge, legally anyway. Meanwhile, a White House court filing of the lawsuit acknowledges that Mr. Musk is not an employee of Doge or its leader. In a declaration Monday from Joshua Fisher, the director of the Office of Administration, Musk is described as a White House employee. He holds the position, the declaration states, as a special government employee who serves as senior advisor to the president. The filing goes on to say that Musk is not an employee of the separate U.S. Doge Service or the U.S. Doge Service Temporary Organization tasked with improving government technology and cutting spending or staffing. In his role as a senior advisor to the president, Mr. Musk has no greater authority than other White House advisors, the filing reads. Like other senior White House advisors, Mr. Musk has no actual or formal authority to make government decisions himself. Mr. Musk can only advise the president and communicate the president's directives. The White House filing also says Musk is not the USDS administrator in charge of the Doge effort and did not mention who holds that position. The filing's characterization of Musk's role contradicts the public representations made by Musk, Doge, and Trump about the billionaire's position in the federal government, and continues to raise questions about the operations of an effort that Musk claimed to be maximally transparent. When Trump first announced Doge, it was pitched as an outside review of the government co-led by Musk and former GOP presidential candidate and tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. On Trump's first day in office, one of his many executive actions was to make Doge a government entity, renaming the United States Digital Service and moving that organization under the umbrella of the Executive Office of the President. Just last week, Musk was in the Oval Office sitting next to Trump answering questions about Doge, referring to our actions taken to direct agencies to cancel contracts and make other changes. Speaking to reporters Tuesday, Trump said, Elon is, to me, a patriot. So you could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could call him whatever you want, but he's a patriot. National Science Foundation fires roughly 10% of its workforce. The National Science Foundation had fired 168 employees on Tuesday, according to an NSF spokesperson. The firings are to ensure compliance with President Trump's executive order aimed at reducing the federal workforce in the name of efficiency. Prior to the firings, about 1,700 staff worked under NSF, managing their $9 billion federal budget that funds research on everything from astrophysics to civil engineering. Staff were called into an emergency meeting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, held on Zoom and in person, where they were told by Micah Cheatman, NSF's chief management officer, that they'd be terminated by the end of the day without severance. According to sources who were present, NSF Director Seth Ruman Pachithanathan, who ordered the firings, did not attend the meeting. Firing talented people, including scientists, who have already invested a year or two with the agency is a waste of resources, says Neil Lane, who served as the director of the NSF from 1993 to 1998. The U.S. needs more scientists, engineers, and other technical talent. These firings will cause many of them to leave the field. NPR spoke with over half a dozen NSF employees, some who still remain at the agency and some who were terminated. NPR has granted them anonymity, as they all say they fear retaliation for speaking publicly, either losing their current jobs if they're employed, or for those let go, fearing their remaining colleagues may be targeted. Many of those fired were program officers, who manage research programs by evaluating grants, pulling together research panels, and making decisions about which grants to fund. All that work isn't going to get done, said one fired consultant who worked on expanding the STEM workforce. We have a need for people trained in these emerging technologies of AI and semiconductors. This is just going to totally devastate our ability to do that, and we will continue to have to rely on foreign workers who are getting that training and coming into this country, which is exactly what I thought the government didn't want to do. The firings targeted probationary employees, who have fewer job protections than permanent employees, but still must be fired for cause. Some probationary staff are new to the agency, while others recently promoted or transferred positions. Additionally, all intermittent experts, temporary employees hired at will, often for specific subject matters expertise, were terminated. In termination notices, probationary employees were told that the agency finds based on your performance that you have not demonstrated that your further employment at the agency would be in the public interest. But several of the fired employees who spoke to NPR say they had exemplary records, including awards from the director. I'll be curious to see how the courts handle the blatant lie about performance, said one terminated program director. Several fired NSF employees who spoke to NPR were permanent hires, but reclassified as probationary despite having completed their year-long probationary period. They said that the reclassification happened in January without explanation, at the direction of the White House Office of Personnel Management. Everyone is trying to be the very best stewards of tax dollars we can be. One fired program officer in the geosciences resigned from a tenured facility job after getting official notice that they had been hired permanently by NSF. My official paperwork in the system reflects that I'm permanent. I've not been issued any new documents, not had any formal communication from NSF telling me otherwise, the officer said. That officer left the job security of a tenured position to give back to my country and the scientific community, certainly not for the pay or the workload, they said. These are some of the hardest working people I've ever met, and everyone is trying to be the very best stewardess of tax dollars we can be. One fired employee NPR spoke to worked on ensuring that existing grants were actually doing what the researchers set out to do. Without people like me, there's no one to oversee that external evaluation or accountability. With fewer staff, grant reviews and awards will slow down or stall out, employees told NPR. Ultimately, that would delay new discoveries that could improve people's lives or scientists' understanding of the natural world. These arbitrary findings and failures of leadership directly impact the agency's ability to evaluate and fund good science, says Mary Feeney, a public policy researcher at Arizona State University. It is demoralizing for those who remain at the NSF and will negatively affect the government's ability to attract talent to public service in the future. The firings come amid a period of tumult at the research agency under the new administration. In late January, NSF paused all grant review for several weeks and temporarily froze funds for existing grants, while they worked to evaluate how their grants complied with Trump's executive orders targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Staff have also been told that billions could be cut from the budget, and more firings could be coming over the next couple months. It's not good, says one NSF employee. I don't know what NSF is going to be now, but it's not more efficient. It's just a mess. Artists protest new NEA restrictions. Hundreds of artists signed a letter to the National Endowment for the Arts, asking it to reverse policy changes that made a result of recent executive orders issued by President Donald Trump. We oppose this betrayal of the endowment's mission to foster and sustain an environment in which the arts benefit everyone in the United States, the letter said. Annie Dorson, a New York-based writer and data director who spearheaded the effort, shared the letter with NPR. She said it was signed by 463 artists from a wide variety of disciplines, including playwrights Lynn Nottage and Paula Vogel. Trump and his enablers may use doublespeak to claim or support for artists of color amounts to discrimination, and that funding the work of trans and women artists promotes gender ideology, whatever that is. But we know better. The arts are for and represent everybody. We can't give that up, the letter said. Dorson told NPR she sent the letter privately to the NEA on Tuesday morning. She also shared it with the New York Times, which was the first to report on it. In an email to NPR, a spokeswoman for the NEA said, It is my understanding that no person at the NAA has received the letter described in your email. However, presidential executive orders have the full force and effect of law, and within the executive branch must be implemented consistent with applicable law. The National Endowment for the Arts is a federal agency and will fully comply with the law. Calling for a rollback of compliance rules. The letter specifically called for the NEA to roll back compliance rules for the Grants of Arts project, which now require applicants to abide by 2 executive orders issued by Trump. One states applicants should not operate any programs promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion that violate any applicable federal anti-discrimination laws. The other, which targets transgender and other LGBTQ arts programming, states that federal grants must not be used to promote gender ideology, with reference to an executive order recognizing only 2 sexes, male and female. NPR attended an NEA workshop Tuesday afternoon for art groups planning to apply for grants. Questions were not taken in the session, but had to be sent in advance. No mention was made of the new restrictions in the Q&A session. The First Amendment is one of the most cherished principles that this country was founded on, and we all like to think of this country as being where artists have the right to self-expression, as we all do, said Dorson. So this action by the NEA is more than concerning, because it seems to suggest that through these sort of weird executive orders and the applications of them to certain agencies, that freedom is being taken away bit by bit. The letter comes amid a growing number of artist-led protests against the Trump administration. They include one involving dancers in Washington, D.C., in connection with Trump's dismissing leaders of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and making himself chair. The issue is not over what we sent this letter, Dorson said. It's a signal to them that we know what's happening and we're not staying silent about it. A$AP Rocky acquitted of shooting former friend. The rapper has faced 2 felony counts of assault with a firearm in connection with a 2021 altercation in Los Angeles. A$AP Rocky, the Grammy-nominated hip-hop artist, was found not guilty on Tuesday of shooting a former collaborator. The jury deliberated for nearly 3 hours in a case that threatened to derail his multifaceted career. Rocky, 36, born Rakeem Mayers, faced 2 felony counts of assault with a deadly weapon stemming from an altercation with his one-time friend Terrell Efron, known as A$AP Relly, near a Hollywood hotel in 2021. Rocky dove into the gallery to hug family, including Rihanna, the singer, businesswoman, and mother of his 2 sons, and embraced his lawyer, Joe Tacopina, after the verdict was read. "Thank you all for saving my life," he told jurors. The trial hinged on jurors' assessment of the gun used in the incident, which prosecutors said was a semi-automatic firearm, and witnesses for the defense testified was instead a prop gun acquired at the filming of a music video. No gun was presented as evidence in the trial, and Rocky did not take the stand in his defense. He faced up to 24 years in prison if convicted of both counts. Rocky faced trial at a time when he had several notable projects in the works. He is scheduled to be one of the headliners of the Los Angeles stop of the Rolling Loud Festival in March, and was announced as one of the celebrity chairs for the Met Gala to be held in May. He also stars alongside Denzel Washington in a Spike Lee-directed movie scheduled to open in summer. John Loon, a deputy district attorney for Los Angeles County, had asked the jury not to be swayed by the court appearances of Rihanna, who was a frequent present during the 13-day trial, and attended the start of closing arguments last week with the pair of 2 young sons. Rocky did not want her here, Tacopina said. He wanted to shield her from this. Wild horses couldn't keep her away. The 3-week trial was the culmination of a dispute between former collaborators Relly and Rocky. The high school friends once belonged to the same rap collective called A$AP, Always Strive and Prosper Mob, but their relationship had grown acrimonious. They agreed to meet on the evening of November 6, 2021 to clear their differences, Relly testified. Relly claimed Rocky arrived with 2 men, A$AP Twelvey, born Jamal Phillips, and A$AP Ills, born Elijah Ulanger, at a parking lot garage near the West Hotel in Hollywood. Relly described briefly arguing with Rocky before the parties separated. The confrontation resumed a few minutes later, and Rocky pulled a gun from his waistband, and Relly attempted to hide behind Ills. Relly testified that Rocky fired at him, grazing his right hand. The prosecution presented surveillance video showing Rocky holding a gun before the shooting in support of its claim. The whole thing was like a movie. He kind of pointed down and he shot the first shot, Relly testified. Twelvey and another defense witness testified that Rocky had fired blanks from a prop gun, which he had started carrying months earlier in the recommendation of a security advisor, and that Relly knew it was fake. The defense maintained that Rocky had only intended to defend Ills from being physically attacked by Relly, and that Relly had exaggerated events to extort Rocky and later support his quest for damages in a civil trial. Relly had spent several days testifying at the trial, including sitting for a contentious cross-examination with Tacopina. Relly grew frustrated when Tacopina showed his Instagram page in court and that he received death threats because of the accusations he had made. At one point, Judge Mark S. Arnold asked an animated Relly to take it easy and advised him to drink some water. "I'm not on trial," Relly said. "I've been here for 5 days dealing with this man. I've been looking stupid for 5 days. Tacopina called Relly a perjury machine during his closing on Friday and labeled Relly's injuries as knuckle scrapes that could have been sustained in a fight or a fall. Thomas Zizzo, a Los Angeles police sergeant, the son of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills cast member, and one of the first authorities to arrive on the scene after the incident, testified that it was difficult to determine whether a crime had taken place. Though police could not locate evidence of a discharged weapon at the scene, Relly testified that he returned to the area later that night and retrieved two 9mm shell casings. Police failed to find the gun that became the strongest point for the defense, said Sam Bassett, a Texas-based criminal defense attorney who had represented athletes and lawmakers. Relly also filed a lawsuit in civil court against Rocky for damages sustained during the shooting and a defamation suit against Rocky and Tacopina that are now imperiled by the not guilty verdict. "He sued us, and after today, I don't think that's going so well," Tacopina said. Hochul may deploy National Guard as wildcat strikes hit 25 New York prisons. Correction officers without their union approval refuse to show up for work to protest what they say are hazardous conditions and severe staff shortages. Governor Kathy Hochul threatened on Tuesday to use the National Guard to ensure the safety of New York's prisons after wildcat strikes by correction officers spread to more than half of the state's 42 penitentiaries. The threat was a response to labor actions that began on Monday, with workers assigned to 2 upstate prisons refusing to come to work to protest staff shortages and other conditions. By Tuesday, strikes had emerged at 25 prisons, state officials said. The officers' union said it had not authorized the job actions, and Ms. Hochul, calling them illegal and unlawful, said she was considering forcing the officers back to work by invoking a state law that prohibits most public employees in New York from going out on strike. "We will not allow these individuals to jeopardize the safety of their colleagues, incarcerated people, and the residents of communities surrounding our correctional facilities," the governor said in a statement. The strikes, the first widespread work stoppage in New York's prison since a 16-day walkout by officers in 1979, come as the state correctional system faces close scrutiny stemming from the fatal beating of a 43-year-old inmate by officers in December. Criminal charges are likely to be announced on Thursday against at least some of the officers and other Corrections Department employees who state officials have implicated in the killing of the man, Robert Brooks, at Marcy Correctional Facility near Utica. The attack on Mr. Brooks, who had been serving a 12-year sentence after pleading to first-degree assault and the stabbing of a former girlfriend, was captured on several officers' body-worn cameras. The footage shows some officers punching, kicking, and violently grabbing Mr. Brooks, who is shackled and handcuffed, while others look on. 2 weeks after Mr. Brooks' death, December 10th death, Ms. Hochul ordered the state correctional commissioner to suspend those implicated in the attack, 16 correction officers and 2 nurses, as a step towards firing them. 2 officers have resigned. Like Ms. Hochul, the commissioner, Daniel F. Marticello III, and the union representing officers, the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, were in harmony as they both condemned the deadly assault on Mr. Brooks. The Times Union of Albany reported this month, however, that the union had issued a vote of no confidence in Mr. Marticello, in part because of a reduction in the number of officers has forced the union members to work overtime in increasingly dangerous conditions. Anger at the commissioner appears to have increased after he issued a memo to prison superintendents last week, in which he said the department would have to get by with 70% of its typical workforce because of the persistent staff shortages. The striking officers, whose current 3-year contract runs through March 2026, refuse to accept the smaller force as permanent, and increasing its size is among their demands. Another major point of contention is a state law that took effect in 2022 and strictly limits who can be placed in solitary confinement, for what reason, and how long they can be kept there. When it was passed by legislature, the law was hailed as a groundbreaking measure that would fundamentally change life for people behind bars, but the officers' union has said that the restrictions endanger them and incarcerated people alike, and the strikers are demanding for the law to be reversed. When the first picket lines began to form at the Collins and Elmira correction facilities on Monday, a spokesman for the union said the actions were not in any way sanctioned by the group, and those who failed to appear for their shifts were doing so as a result of their discontentment with current working conditions. Jennifer Scaffey, a executive director of the Correctional Association in New York, a state prison oversight group, said officers at prisons across the state have complained to the association of regularly having to work 16-hour shifts. Such schedules were unsustainable and a sign of crisis in the prison system, she said. But she also noted the strikers were demanding things the governor could not provide unilaterally in a way that did not serve the union's interest either in the short or long term. Prisoners' rights groups criticized the strikes. One accused the strikers of trying to divert attention from the death of Mr. Brooks. Others warned that the actions were putting thousands of inmates at risk, causing them to go without meals, medications, and programming. Attica Correctional Facility was among the prisons targeted by strikers on Tuesday, and one of 8 where correctional officers suspended visitation. Khadijah Shakur, whose son is incarcerated there, said in an interview that he had told her on Tuesday that he and other prisoners were given no meals until 1 p.m., when they received a small box of bran flakes, an apple, and milk, instead of a full meal in the prison cafeteria. He said, "Mommy, there's nobody in here," Ms. Shakur said. "People are concerned." That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.